Hello and welcome to Cryptid by Region, France. I was recently going over my list of locations I have already investigated in this series, and I was shocked that I have yet to make a video about France. Well, I figured it was long past due that we visit this country and try to uncover what mysterious beasts are said to hide in the shadows. It is worth noting that while there are quite a few creatures known, a lot seem to be found in lore, so we will do the best that we can. Also, it is interesting that France appears to have way more and unique UFO sightings than anything else. So join me once again on our Cryptid Family World Tour as we venture from our previous location of Slovenia and head due west to France. France was inhabited by Neanderthals dating far back in history, and they were replaced by modern humans 43,000 years ago. Much of the area we now know as France was originally called Gaul by the Romans, named after a Celtic group of people with the same name. Following this, Greek explorers known as Phoceans traveled to the area and established famous cities that are still around today, such as Marseille and Nice. These groups of people remained in power for quite some time, that is, until Julius Caesar conquered the lands for the Roman Empire. Years later, the empire would begin to collapse, and in 486, the first king of the Franks, named Clovis I, managed to unite northern and central Gaul under his rule after defeating the Romans in battle. The Franks would remain in power until the early 900s, when due to pressure from invading Viking tribes, they would all combine under the name of Normans. The area mostly had a decentralized style of rule until the Franks would re-emerge with a dynasty known as the Capetians, named after Hugh Capet. This body established a monarchy that lasted well into the 1300s. Although, during Philip II Augustus's rule, between 1179 and 1223, he was the first to not call himself the King of Franks, but utilized the term King of France. Following this, Edward III from England declared himself King of France, and the English controlled the area for a century. Eventually, the English would be removed and replaced with a French ruler named Louis XI. Jumping ahead, France had many battles both internally and with outside forces such as Germany, Spain, and England. However, in 1804, General Napoleon Bonaparte was named Emperor of France, which began the first true French Empire. With this control, he branched out the country's forces and was successful in winning many battles. Even when Prussia, Russia, and England combined armies, France still emerged victorious. Things were going well until 1812, when Napoleon continually lost war after war, which even included Spain fighting back and reclaiming its lands. Finally, at the Battle of the Nations, which faced the French versus the combined might of four of the countries, Napoleon was defeated and exiled to Elba, an island outside of Italy. While the war was a loss, it is noted that the Allied forces did suffer more casualties than the French army. Napoleon did try to return, but was overthrown and Louis XVI was made king. Even as such, many of the systems Napoleon established while emperor actually saved the country and allowed it to flourish. Through the years, there were many flags utilized to represent France, although a common symbol was that of a tricolor cockade. In 1794, the flag we see today emerged as one that could be used to represent the common people, army, and navy. It changed a few times after this, but since March 5, 1848, it has remained the official flag of France. From what I have seen, many flags utilizing a tricolor didn't actually have a meaning behind each hue. With that said, there are a few unofficial theories. Some say the white stood for the king, and the red and blue represented the colors used by revolutionaries in Paris. Others state that the white is for nobility, blue for clergy, and the white for the bourgeois, or middle class. A more modern interpretation is that they represent liberty, equality, and brotherhood. So, let's look at some cryptids. When it comes to creatures in France, they tend to fall into a couple categories, with honestly not a lot of water-based ones. However, quite a few of these creatures' existence are questionable, but I will attempt to not talk about pure fantasy ones. In saying all that, our first creature is known as the Lou Karkhold. This beast was said to make its home in the caves underneath the town of Astonga. It was described as being a massive snake-like creature that was more akin to a snail. It had a shell on its back, left a slime trail behind it, and it had 2 flat ribbon-like tentacles that were covered in sticky brown hairs. It was known to make its home in the deep tunnels of the caves located under the town, and would rest during the daytime but venture out for food at night. Many people claim to have seen the slime trail left by the beast, but few dared to hunt it down. This is all due to the fact that the simple giant snail was known to be carnivorous and frequently made a meal out of people who didn't give it a wide berth. It was said that if a person ventured too close to the cave or even found it at night, that it would wrap its tentacles around a person's body, slam them against its shell, and then devour them whole with its massive mouth. There are some stories that claim that its arms were actually so long that it could reach someone without even seeing the beast. It is even said that it would sometimes leave its arms lying on the ground alongside its trail, just waiting to grab anyone who dared to get too close. A story about an eyewitness report was even included in a 1903 article titled Revue de Gascogne from the Regional Historical Society. It is said that finding grass that appears brown and has blades that are long and ribbon-like is a sure sign that this creature has passed through the area. Apparently, its slime mutates the grass somehow. Weirdly, reports emerged that a merchant managed to steal some of the beast's eggs at one point. When the man ventured to the US, he was robbed of all possessions while at port, which included the eggs. It is said one egg survived, and there is a similar creature here in the States. I have yet to run across that, but I will be looking out for it now. Other rumors state that the Cousteau family has 2 eggs as well, and they are said to show them off from time to time at the Trompe l'Oeil house. The creature hasn't been seen for many years, which some assume means it's dead, yet others feel it is still in the tunnel, simply hibernating. Going from that oddity, we move to another strange creature known as the Paluda. It was said to make its home in the river Uina. It was said to look like a giant lizard with a snake-like neck, head, and tail. Its legs were similar to that of a tortoise, and its body was covered in long green hairs that were like porcupine quills. It was capable of throwing those quills like arrows at people, and it could produce a stream of fire from its mouth. In mentioning that, it is worth noting that while a few details changed over time, the one feature that was written about by many sources was that it did in fact possess flame breath. The Paluda would use its massive tail to strike its victims, which would either kill them or leave them severely hurt. It was known to be capable of eating a whole herd of sheep, but would also eat any human that it came across. During the Middle Ages, this beast ventured from its home and started attacking villages fairly frequently. It went so far as the city of La Ferté-Bernard, where it killed many people. According to the lore, it was killed by a knight when it was stabbed in the tail. Apparently, this creature was only weak in the tail and the neck. The beast was said to have died beside the bridge of Yves-l'Évêque, and a celebration was held for many days. Afterwards, the locals stuffed and embalmed the body. There isn't a word on where it ended up after that. Next, we find the beast known as the Gevo. It had the body of a serpent, a short neck, 4 legs like a bird, horns on its head, and some variations even said that it had wings like a bat. While similar to what many think of as a dragon, these creatures were known to not get too large. Although in some reports, the Gevo could stand between 5 and 10 feet and was 12 to 48 feet long. The being did have sharp teeth and could produce a type of poison. While they would eat humans, they tended to only make this choice if no other food source was around. With that said, when fully grown, it was known to be highly aggressive and would attack someone even if unprovoked. The creature made its home in any body of water it could find, but it also liked dense forests. If water wasn't available, they would burrow underground as well. According to lore, these creatures actually reproduced rather quickly, and soon became a problem species all over France, Spain, and even Germany. There is a famous story about a Cornish saint named Samson of Dole, who claimed to have seen one of these beasts firsthand. In the story, he claimed that a priest he was visiting actually had one hidden under his robes, and was secretly feeding it bread. When discovered, Samson killed the creature and had one of his companions toss its body from the roof of the building. In a real twist, there are claims that this being is actually the same species as Nessie. In those claims, it is said that one of these creatures swam through the Moray Firth and has lived in Loch Ness ever since. It isn't too often we find two cryptids being linked together, so maybe there is something to this story. Now, we have two creatures that are considered separate beings, but I feel they may be one and the same. First, we have the Cheval Malais from the Pays de Ré area. It is considered an evil horse that only appears at nighttime and is either all black or white. It walks along paths hoping to find a weary traveler. Apparently, it is capable of making a person think it actually has a saddle on it, in the hopes that someone tries to hitch a ride. Once someone falls for this, the horse immediately runs away with the rider stuck to them, and that person is never seen again. Some claim that pieces of clothing or bones are sometimes found, or that the horse will outright kill a person if they get near. However, it is more commonly told that they simply take the person away. Now, near the city of Arles, a very similar story is told about a horse called the Loup Karkhold. This version also appears at night and walks around the town looking for its victims, which typically are children. It will walk around gathering children on its back until it finally runs off with them, never to be seen again. Legend states that no one knows where this creature takes its victims, and oddly enough, it is said that no one wants to know where it goes. Many assume it takes them into the water. While these stories seem like something from folklore, it is interesting to note that similar beings are found in all different cultures' lore. Other horses like this would be the Kelpie and the Yahuska. Both such creatures act very much the same, and the victim's fate ends with death. Finally, I want to quickfire two very different beings, although there isn't a lot of information about them. The first is called the Carnabo, and was said to be found around the commune of, and I couldn't find a pronunciation for this, Regniauez. This being was said to make its home in a slate quarry, and it looked like a man, but it had the eyes of a snake and the trunk of an elephant. While it wasn't seen as a threat to humans since it didn't attack them, it was capable of producing a poisonous breath that could paralyze men and kill animals. Even as such, at one point it was said to have kidnapped a girl who ventured too close to its cave. In retaliation, the townsfolk blocked off the entrance, and it is said you can still hear the girl's screams and the Carnabo's whistling sounds in the dead of a winter's night. The last one isn't a creature at all, but rather a plant, known as the herb Igaramo. It doesn't have a description other than it being similar to a fern. Lore states that it grows in the forests, and if a person steps on or over it, they will become disoriented. The effect will cause them to become lost in the forest, and can lead them to be walking on the same path over and over again without even realizing it. If this happens at night, the person will only break the spell once morning comes. If it happens during the day, then another person is required to snap them out of the plant's power. Again, this seems really out there, but similar stories about the same plant are found in Germany, Sweden, the US, Italy, and Switzerland. This really makes one think that maybe there is something to this lore, and that I may need to be more careful when walking about the forest. As usual, I couldn't talk about all the cryptids found here, so that is what our honorable mention section is for. In its return, we find that France does have a few stories about Bigfoot-like creatures. Typically, they were known as wild men, and there are old child stories about a being known as Jean de Luz. Though typically seen as a bear man, I will consider it for Bigfoot. There also is a type of Yeti found here, known as the Barbagatse. It shouldn't be much of a shock to know that dogmen in the form of the Loup-Garou have stories here. I would suppose this also could extend to a lesser degree to the famous dog-wolf creature known as the Beast of Gévaudan. This next one, I don't know what to consider it, but it is called the Kamacrusa. This thing is a creature from Gascony that roams about at night and is quite literally a severed human leg that somehow eats people. Not only this, but is capable of running fast and jumping great distances. I think I'll just leave that there. I mentioned a few serpent-like creatures in the main list, but there is also the Gauli, which is depicted exactly as a dragon from the city of Metz. You can also find a dragon-like being that has a lion head and a turtle shell in Provence by the name of Tarasque. I will mention one that I think you should look up, since a brief description doesn't serve it justice, and it is the Beastie Glotissant. Descriptions vary, but its young are supposed to make screaming noises from its belly, and they eventually devour the mother when they emerge. Then again, maybe you don't want to look this one up. There are random reports of ogres being found in France from a long time ago. A mermaid-like creature known as the Melusine was said to be found in the waters around the land. The main difference was this version was said to actually have serpent-like tails rather than a typical fish. Maybe this was a version of the Naga. While not technically cryptids, there are reports of fairies, including a recent sighting from 2010. I'll include a link to that story in the description. As I end this, I hope you enjoyed the video, and that I made France proud. I always enjoy finding locations that have creatures that link to other cryptids, and aren't your typical beasts frequently talked about. Please remember to keep voting for which state you would like to see next in our Cryptid by State series. I am sorry that I have been fairly absent from the comment section as of late, but my time schedule has been fairly tight recently. I promise you that I do read each and every one of your comments, and am keeping the tally going. I'm trying to get back to responding to most everyone, but please be patient with me. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you share my videos with someone you know who may enjoy this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.